there's numbers that are reported and put out there from outlets, and I don't think that really necessarily helps anything whatsoever. It definitely doesn't help the program whatsoever, but it doesn't help both sides. And definitely if you're in support of a collective or, the battle's end here, I don't think those numbers should be shared. I don't think that's the right place to help anyone. And I think too, the organizations, the collectives, they've got to crack down on that kind of stuff becoming public, because it allows us to see it, allows fans to see it, which you can tell right away, immediately. There were some Rodney Hill numbers going out. Fans were just going right at Rodney Hill and just yelling at him. And it doesn't even give a chance for maybe the players to sit back, think about a few things, and before even meeting maybe their position coaches. It doesn't help anything whatsoever when numbers are shared out there. And I think that's something that, and we're in a new age of how this NIL stuff works and everything, but it's got to be changed, and things got to be more private. And I think this is something that the battle's end is a learning lesson. These numbers do not need to be public. I have no idea why they're public. It just doesn't help anything whatsoever, and it's really unprofessional in my opinion.
I totally agree.
Hey guys, it's Terrence Nan. You're listening to Hear the Spear, presented by Noel Game Day. Go Noles.
Hey, what's up? This is Peter Ward, aka E-Dub, in the house. We're listening to Hear the Spear, presented by Noel Game Day. Go Live, go Noles.
Hi, this is Charlie Ward, and you're listening to Hear the Spear. Go Noles.
This is Terrell Buckley. You're listening to Hear the Spear, presented by Noel Game Day. No Bloody.
But perhaps better known as the greatest corner to ever step on a football field, Deion Primetime Sanders.
Great Deion Sanders, my brother.
What's going on, man? I could wake up to that greeting every day, man. That was awesome.
Hello, Noles fans. This is former Seminole Derek Brooks, and you're listening to Hear the Spear, presented to you by Noel Game Day.
James Wilder Jr. What's going on, James?
Thanks for having me on. FSOD, Florida State or Die, and go Noles.
William Bar None Floyd.
Gentlemen, what's up?
What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Hear the Spear, presented to you by NoelGameDay.com. We're here live on a wonderful, fantastic Wednesday evening. I guess It just depends on how some fans think on it. But
fantastic.
It's been an interesting Wednesday, but still a good one to come on here and recap Florida State's 2024 early signing day class. Not everything fully solidified, but for right now, it seems like Florida State's going to hold on to a top 10 class, maybe a little bit different than how they had thought originally, coming into potentially being a top 5 class in the country. But nonetheless, Florida State does what they need to do in some areas, but we'll discuss it here in a few. Losing out on a commit and having them flip over to Georgia is definitely not the way that you kind of want to finish off the afternoon, and losing one of your top tier players, the top tier player in your class. But we'll discuss that in just a few, about KJ Bolden. We'll talk about Jeremiah Smith as well. We're going to talk about a majority of these 2024 signees, a lot of serious talent coming into Tallahassee. So we'll be jumping in there to discuss everything related to what Mike Norvell brought in for this year. We're going to talk also Marvin Jones Jr. committing to Florida State. Didn't take too long there, but Shade Tree's son is officially a Seminole, still waiting on the papers to come through there. But other than that, we're going to talk Lundy and Hill. Those guys officially are in the transfer portal. We got some Noles that are heading to the pros, including star defensive end Jared Verse. And then we're going to talk a little bit maybe about FSU, Georgia, as we'll be heading down to Miami next week. And for just a hot, quick second, VZ is going to give us the latest on Florida State and Leonard Hamilton and the Florida State basketball team. But before we get started, as always, you can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button. We would definitely appreciate it. Thanks for everyone tuning in the last couple of weeks. It has been awesome to have you guys come in here, give us some questions, give us some topics, and honestly just have y'all chatting with us. Helps us go on with the show. So appreciate everyone. It is a busy show tonight, so we'll get right started. With me this evening is Dustin Lewis, our editor-in-chief at NoelGaming.com, and down below is our lead game preview guy for Florida State football, but also our lead basketball writer, Austin VZ. Gentlemen, how we doing? How we feeling?
We're here. Another
another early signing period, another year where Florida State loses out on top commits and top targets. So you have a really good class here in the fold. Number 10 in the country. Have addressed a ton of positions and have some real talent coming into Tallahassee. But once again, it's the optics with the way Florida State finishes and loses a really talented player, their top recruit in the class at the very end.
I feel like my stance on high school football recruiting is well known on this podcast at this point, and nothing's going to change about that, whether they had a great day or a bad day today. They still got in a good talented class with a bunch of blue chip prospects. It's still, a 70% blue chip ratio. Still a good class, just didn't close the way you probably preferred, but nothing goes the way you prefer in college football. It's the way it is these days.
Nope, it is nonstop. You got to deal with NIL and that whole part of the world, and then you just got to also deal with just regular things going on that goes into recruiting. It's crazy that now we have a whole nother world to think of when it comes into some of these younger players, and now when there's money related, things change up quite a bit, but it's something that we have to get used to, and things really can come down to the last minute if it wasn't already suspenseful and stressful enough. But this day and age, NIL is a big factor. So let's jump into KJ Bolden. Florida State missing out on a really talented player out of Georgia. Was committed to Florida State for a good while. Was really, I thought, kind of turned into a little bit of a bell cow there for Florida State. Charles Lester, them building a relationship there too. Low Cromenhawk, now in the fold too, signed today with the Seminoles. But KJ Bolden, he's no longer Seminole. Came down to his ceremony and it was fully prepped in Georgia gear. This wasn't maybe a kind of a shocker kind of ceremony like maybe we were looking to see. It kind of was already pretty much prepared fully in every regard. And I saw the reception afterwards with all Georgia gear and balloons and festivities. It was practically a Bulldog festival there. And it seems like his mind was made up well in advance. And Dustin, we were here to hear from KJ Bolden when he was right outside Doak, outside the Moore, and was telling you guys, you already know, I'm with FSU, and definitely felt a little awkward there. And definitely now looking back at it, it's easy to say now looking back, but it just didn't seem right at the time. And then you see this manage into what seemed to be, Georgia's for a good long while, and he had been visiting too for some Orange Bowl practices, which guess what? They're facing the Georgia Bulldogs next weekend.
Yeah, very tough for Florida State. Like you said, it was definitely an awkward situation outside the Moore. Whenever KJ finished his official visit this past weekend, we had started doing the normal interview process and got about 3 or 4 questions in, and then his mom walked over and pulled him away and said, "We've got to go," and pulled him into the car. And we were all standing there for a couple minutes, and then he got back out of the car, and that was when he was asked, the video that people see floating around on social media where he was straight up asked, "Are you planning to sign with Florida State on Wednesday?" And he responded, "Come on, man, you know that," and something about getting his letter of intent, which he did leave the facility that day with the letter of intent. But, Georgia, they had some resources become available as of late. They had a 5-star quarterback flip to Nebraska. They've had some guys who were very high caliber recruits and also good players at the college level enter the transfer portal and move on. They needed a win, and I think that everyone can kind of tell that they went all out to get it. But it's another, you can't say anything else except that it's disappointing and it's a failure for Florida State. You had it happen with Travis Hunter a couple years ago, but you can make the argument, he loved Deion Sanders growing up, and Florida State was 5-7 at the time, and even last year, with Keldrick Falk flipping, it's the hometown school, and they also had a pretty good NIL offer on the table. But with this one, KJ Bolden saying Florida State's his dream school. Here we are in this scenario. Once again, coming to Florida State back in August, as you said, Logan, being a really vocal recruiter for this class and, pumping FSU up throughout the season. And then you have Florida State also finish 13-0, do everything right on the field, ACC champions, future looks really bright. And you get the last visit before he signs and you lose out anyway. So terrible situation for the Seminoles.
Sometimes the money is not enough. And to say it's a failure to me is a stretch, especially considering the DB class you still have coming in between Charles Lester, Jamari Howard, Kai Bates, and Ricky Knight. That's a very talented secondary class. KJ Bolden would have been absolutely the ice on the cake and arguably the best of the bunch, but it's not like you don't have great players coming in already. It's a very, very talented secondary class, one of the best in the country. So to me, to say it's a failure is a stretch, disappointing for sure, but still a ton of talent that you can hang your hat on back there.
They're really great ones, but KJ was the top talent in that defensive backfield class coming in. He was the top player overall in the class. Would have been the top player that Mike Norvell has signed since he arrived at Florida State. And again, it's just the optics of, once again, losing your top recruit at the very end of the cycle after having him in the fold for this long and then letting him slip out of your fingers. There's some questions about how Florida State is able to close these recruiting cycles.
Yeah, they're not finishing well when you would expect them to, and these players come in, and what Mike Norvell has been able to do, they build those relationships and everything, but it's just that finish there at the very end that they just cannot get done. And if it's up to also staff, and we've saw what Coach Surtain has been able to do in just his first year here, not even a year fully, but what he's been able to do in his tenure at Florida State, and what you saw on the field too, but bringing in some serious talent in that defensive back room. Yeah, I guess it's a different kind of failure in my opinion, just because you were so close to, bringing in your top talent that you had in the class. But is it a failure for this 2024 class? Is it a debacle? Absolutely not. There's some good talent there, but KJ Bolden is a special athlete. He's a two-way guy. He's got some crazy abilities that, Mike Norvell, kind of like drools at, that he can add to his arsenal on offense. And that's what makes his offense go so well, is getting the ball to his playmakers. And we saw that last year. We saw this in this season right now, but it's just not a great look either. Like you're saying, Dustin, the optics aren't great. And you just have a lot of question marks on what needs to be done in order to solidify these top tier guys getting into your program and not having them slip at the last minute. It's getting old. It's getting old, and that shouldn't be the case going and winning 13-0.
And it's still a very good class, a top 10 class. You're bringing in 4 blue chip defensive backs, but it's just the way you finish, and it just kind of leaves a sour taste in some people's mouths to lose your top recruit in that type of fashion.
It's a sour taste in too many people's mouths, if I'm being honest. Like, it's one recruit. Florida State's going to be more than fine. I can guarantee that. They've gone 13-0 without any 5-stars at this point. I don't think KJ Bolden's going to make a huge difference on next year or the year after that, if I'm being completely honest. There's still plenty of talent there.
And the good thing is you do have Charles Lester coming in, who is a 5-star defensive back in his own right, and someone that's been committed to Florida State, since before KJ Bolden, another guy who grew up, wanted to play at Florida State, and now he followed through and will get the opportunity to do so. And Mike Norvell had a lot of positive things to say about him during the signing day press conference.
Yep. And then too, I want to jump over to another one. We'll get the bad stuff out of the way early. That way we can jump into some fun stuff, and it's gonna be a roller coaster ride, because we also get to talk about DJ Lundy and some Joshua Farmer stuff and Rodney Hill. But it's gonna be a roller coaster of a ride of a show. But just sit back, relax. Things will get a little bit smoother here. But let's talk about Jeremiah Smith, a player that would just have been icing on the cake for this 2024 class coming in, but number 1 rated recruit in the country, been committed to Ohio State for a very long time, and he ends up sticking with his commitment and going to Ohio State. Thoughts on that one, Dustin? Florida State was pushing very hard here, and they've been able to do this a couple times with some top tier athletes across the country, but just couldn't get close enough to make that flip to put him in Ron Dugan's wide receiver room.
This was always an uphill battle for Florida State to climb. Obviously Smith has been committed to Ohio State already for about a year, and everyone knows the history that the Buckeyes have with producing wide receivers, even getting Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Heisman ceremony this season, as well as the Bullitt Knopf Award, and having Brian Hartline there, someone who Smith has a really good relationship with. So this was always going to be a really tough flip for Florida State to pull off, and they did everything right. They showed the development with their own wide receivers, and everyone got to see what Keon Coleman was able to do. Johnny Wilson, some other guys in that unit producing as well. The coaches had a really good relationship there with Smith. They got him on campus for the official visit very late in the recruiting cycle. And, I honestly think the Seminoles were right there in this recruitment and did everything they could on their end to win out. But Ohio State just enough in the end to finish off and secure Smith's signature, the number one prospect in the 2024 class.
Which I can't even blame him. If I'm a top flight wide receiver, why not go to Ohio State? Given all the talent they produced at wide receiver recently between Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr., they've just continued to produce really good NFL receivers. And while Florida State's receiver room's in a much better place than it was 2 seasons ago, it's not like Ohio State's been the last couple of seasons. So that one doesn't surprise me. It's another one of those, it would have been a great icing on the cake, but there's a ton of talented receivers in Florida State's class, and I think they'll be okay. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith would have been amazing. But again, like with the secondary, there's a ton of talent coming in at that receiver room.
Yeah, not even coming in, but you look back at Florida State's class last year, too, with Hakeem Williams, who I think we're now very intrigued and seeing more of going into this next year, getting into the camp just because of the flash that we saw a little bit. And this year, as a true freshman, then also Vondravius Jacobs, who we are super stoked to see more of going into next season. You can just see the ability that he has, too, whenever he got into some games this year. And there was some reliability, too, later in the season with him. So there's a ton of talent there, and still some that are being developed as well. This, like I said earlier when opening this conversation, it's just it's a recruit that has a super amount of talent, and it would have been just fun to add him to this team. But the big loss is KJ Bolden, and Florida State's going to do what they can moving forward outside of this and see what they need in that transfer portal moving forward. But just those two guys in specifics, one meant a little bit more just because of what they already had in that class. But I give respect to Jeremiah Smith holding on to that commitment, man. He was hearing from a ton of schools, and Florida State was pushing very hard, but that was a loyal guy that ended up sticking around, and I give respect to that for a young kid like that.
For sure. Would have been nice to have him, but Florida State, this is another position. You got four blue chip wide receivers coming in, and, some with some real potential. Thing about a guy like Elijah Moore, a really tantalizing skill set, has some Keon Coleman qualities to his game, and is going to be a real red zone threat, and we'll see how he develops. Camden Fryer, guy who's been committed forever. Loane McCoy, a dynamic South Florida athlete that Mike Norvell really praised today. And then you've got BJ Gibson as well, another guy who's been in the fold for a good amount of time and a really good athlete. So it's another position where you were able to sign some really good prospects.
I like me some Camden Fryer, D-Lou. Love me some Camden Fryer. I think he's got a great mentality. He came on here with Luke, and those two already pair so well together, chemistry-wise and relationship-wise, and on the field, as we saw multiple times, but more specifically when we were in person watching them compete against some good talent, some that are actually on FSU's roster now in that defensive back room. But Camden Fryer is someone that I think Mike Norvell is really, really excited to add to this team. And so let's start talking about some good stuff here, guys, because this is a really impressive class coming into Florida State in 2024. Let's start off at the very we got to give props here where it's due. And let's start off with someone you were tweeting about, Dustin Lewis. And I know it was later in the day where it came in officially, but let's talk Cam Davis. Cam Davis, someone that stuck around for a long while when Florida State wasn't at where they're at now. That's for damn sure. But really, really talented running back that stuck with Florida State, and is also here. The Spear alum came on here and told us all about his commitment and why he picked Florida State, and specifically Mike Norvell, Coach Yak as well too. But how about Cam Davis and what Florida State's getting out of him, not only as a player on the field, but just that kind of mentality and just focus and honestly loyalty that this Florida State program is really going to like.
I love me some Cam Davis. I mean, that kid is just different than a lot of the recruits that you deal with in this day and age. And, you talk about loyalty. He's kind of the epitome of that, been committed to Florida State since before the 2021 season, over 1,000 days. And, there were some tough times early on when he committed. Florida State started off that 2021 year 0-4. There were some people at the time who jumped off the boat, including Landon Thomas, who obviously ended up jumping back on and signing with Florida State today. But Cam Davis stuck around, and he was also a 5-star prospect at the time when he signed with FSU, and has continued to be very productive at the high school level, playing multiple sports while he's been committed to Florida State. But when a prospect commits to a school, especially so early, you kind of lose out on some of those storylines and the drama down the stretch. And Cam Davis, his recruiting ranking suffered some because of that. But I mean, man, this is an elite running back coming into Florida State, a guy who has been loyal and recruited for this class since day one, the very first member of it, and still here standing after all of this time. And, he's finally going to be enrolling in Tallahassee in January. And the running back room has kind of opened up some. You've got Trey Benson moving on to the NFL. We'll see about Rodney Hill, but now officially in the portal. CJ Campbell committed to Florida Atlantic earlier today, going to be continuing his career there. So congrats to him. But there's definitely some room at running back for Cam Davis to come in and make an instant impact. And, he's that type of guy. He's got that mentality where he wants to come in and play a role. And actually what impressed me was after his official visit, he said that he wants to be one of the most vocal players in the running back room as soon as he steps on campus, which, I mean, just so impressive, for a 17, 18-year-old to already have that mentality.
This may be crazy, but he kind of reminds me of when Cam Akers first came in. They're both grown men, little undersized, about 5'10", 5'11", but they're just grown men and ready to come in and compete right away. I think you're going to have a chance to make an impact. Like you said, with Rodney Hill, probably more than likely moving on. There's chances to get some of those snaps with Kazay Holmes and Lawrence Toafili in the fold as well. But he's a special player. I'm really looking forward to seeing him on the field next year.
Let's jump over to another one. Let's start with these guys that have been essential in building this 2024 class. But we got to talk about Luke Kromenhoek, Florida State's future at quarterback, blue chip quarterback. A lot of analysts, a lot of scouts there that were at the Elite 11 think that he might have the highest ceiling out of a lot of those quarterbacks that were there competing. But you get your bell cow, you get your guy that's of the future. Mike Norvell finally gets his guy. If you think about it, man, he hasn't been able to bring in maybe someone that he hasn't had to emergency kind of grab there at the end. I mean, Brock Lynn is maybe a different one of those recruits, but outside of Glenn, though, Mike Norvell hasn't been able to bring in his guy that they self-evaled. And since doing that, a lot of schools came after Luke. We saw kind of a message that he put out on Twitter saying, about loyalty and the definition of it. So you could definitely tell some programs were trying to get in touch with Luke. But from listening to him here on Hear the Spear when he came on here and talked with us, you could just tell that he was bought into the vision and the process of Mike Norvell. And sure enough, Florida State gets their future at the quarterback position.
It was actually just one school that was trying to reach out to Luke Kromenhoek late in the recruiting cycle, and I was actually able to confirm that the Georgia Bulldogs made a late run at Kromenhoek, obviously a very talented player who's from the Peach State, and that was around that time of them losing Dylan Raiola, the 5-star quarterback commit to Nebraska. So scrambling there to try and get another quarterback late in the cycle. Reached out to Kromenhoek and tried to get him on campus. And, instead he ended up in Tallahassee actually this past weekend for a little bit of time and did some recruiting, spoke with KJ Bolden. That one didn't end up working out, but regardless, he was on campus and we're expecting him actually to join the team now shortly for some of these bowl practices. And he'll be able to travel to the Orange Bowl, but won't be eligible to play in the actual game. But some good experience for him and, going to be an early enrollee as well and get a head start to this program. And Luke Kromenhoek, the highest rated quarterback to sign with Florida State since Jameis Winston. I mean, he's truly an elite prospect. And what's crazy is he's only started 2 years at the high school level. Whenever Florida State offered him a scholarship back in the summer of 2021, at the time, Kromenhoek didn't have any other scholarships, hadn't started a game at the high school level, and had spent most of his time playing wide receiver and safety and on special teams. So a testament to Luke, for continuing to develop, and also Florida State, Mike Norvell, Tony Tokars for this evaluation, because to believe in that kid before he's really done anything on paper. I mean, just shows, I think, their scouting ability with what Kromenhoek has developed into.
On one hand, I was kind of surprised to see Georgia make a late run, considering they already have a blue chip quarterback prospect still signed with them, and Ryan Puglisi. I'm just taking a guess on how to pronounce that last name, but at the same time, Luke Kromenhoek's so talented, especially being in the state of Georgia. That's a kid you expect Georgia to take a stab at, get a chance at. But shout out Luke. Really, my uncle play with him because he doesn't have a W last name.
Yeah. But hey, maybe there's another one that's going to come in and help guide him that has a W name, and one that's really familiar to Florida State fans. Who knows? But yeah, Luke's special talent, per 247 Sports, the composite. He's a top 5 quarterback. But like I said, really impressed some people that know quite a bit of things about quarterbacks whenever he was there competing in the Elite 11. So those two guys, Cam Davis and Luke, are those that really kind of stand out when I think about this class, and as an actual natural bell cow, those two are the ones that stand out to me. And another one too, I want to start off with as well, and I want to go to the defensive side. I think we got to talk about Charles Lester. We were there for that commitment, which was a wild commitment. Super fun. Ended up being super fun. It took a little while, but we got Lester there and ended up being a blast. But I saw him commit to Florida State, had the spear in his hand, came off the throne, had a crown on and everything. And he's someone, though, Dustin, I think we talked about on here too. We were kind of like, all right, let's see how long maybe Lester sticks. Will he actually stick all the way throughout his recruitment and stay a Seminole? And sure enough, he did. And he ended up being actually one of Florida State's big bell cows as well in this class, and was trying to connect there with KJ Bolden, helped a ton in some of this running back or defensive back room that Coach Sertan is bringing in this next cycle. But Charles Lester, he's a Seminole, and really talented, that you could put him either in that corner position. You can kind of bounce him around if you want to at safety, but super, super talented. And, one thing I heard from Mike Norvell after, during his press conference, just talking about him, he's got a personality, and we know that. We got to find out as commitment. He's a really good kid, and gave us some time afterwards to get an interview. But just said he's really smart, man. Charles Lester is really smart on the field. He just has that kind of knack to him that you like, and a player of that kind of talent that you can add in with the smarts. Like, I go back and think of like a Jalen or a Derwin, those guys that have that natural ability in their head and where they need to be. But yeah, Charles Lester, he's a Seminole, and Florida State fans should be hella happy tonight.
And there was no real drama with his recruitment other than kind of what he was stirring up himself, because at the end of the day, Charles Lester wasn't going anywhere except for Florida State. He was actually in Tallahassee over the weekend, for an unofficial visit, kind of shoring some things up and he actually walked out when he left with his letter of intent. And he's another guy that we're expecting to join the team here for bowl practices in the near future. But a very special athlete, a very special person on and off the field. And, he's going to bring some charisma, some real energy to this Florida State program. And he's also going to bring some talent. There hasn't been a ton of 5-star prospects that the Seminoles have been able to sign as of late. And you get an elite prospect here in Charles Lester, someone who's played on both sides at the high school level. Going to settle in here, I think, start him off at corner in Tallahassee. But, we'll see. Florida State kind of cross-trains a lot of their defensive backs, and his future could be anywhere in that defensive backfield. But there's another one. Mike Norvell has a really good relationship with Lester, obviously, but Pat Surtain, first year in Tallahassee, and he's able to pull in a 5-star in Charles Lester, and then a couple of other blue chip defensive backs as well.
I love the size they've got in the secondary this year, between Charles Lester, who's 6'1", Jamari Howard 6'2", Kai Bates is 6'2", and then Ricky Knight's a long 6 foot. Just so much size in that secondary, and it's finally getting back to the times when you had the Jalen Ramseys and the Xavier Rhodes. Just so many long corners in that room again. It's gonna be fun to watch them, be physical with some receivers. There's gonna be no more of the Jarvis Brownlees and the Kevin Knowles, the undersized guys matching up. They're gonna have some real size out there. It's gonna be fun to watch.
Yep, I like that Lester swag that he has with him. It feels like it's the Florida State way and that defensive backfield, in my opinion. And just someone that's stuck with that commitment, man. I love that he was teasing around a little bit, and some commits also throwing some shade at Dion. It was pretty funny, but that's something, Lester told us at that commitment ceremony, man. He's locked in, and he was doing a lot to try and do some recruiting, and he was able to land a few guys, and Bolden was one of those. But, in the end all be all, at some point that coaching staff and whatever else NIL related figures it out on its own. It's not up to Lester at that point. But yeah, one of the top cornerbacks in the country is coming to Florida State, and D'Lo, I think you're gonna have some fun watching him. Any chance you get in the early parts of this spring, whenever he's early enrolling and everything, it's gonna be a fun player to watch. Let's jump into, and this is gonna kind of start just becoming a discussion. And Dustin, you can maybe bring up a few more, but Landon Thomas, another player that is going to be a dynamic offensive player for the Florida State Seminoles, one of the top talented tight ends in the country. Like we talked about earlier, once was committed to Florida State, went to Georgia, then flipped back to Florida State and came back to the Seminoles, and now is in this class of adding some serious talent to that offensive side of the ball. But anybody that, there's a few more that I want to mention as well, but maybe Landon Thomas, because he's well worth having a discussion about without much talent he brings.
Yeah, Landon Thomas, a big one for Florida State. Another top 100 recruit, really good, versatile tight end at the high school level. Mike Norvell actually called him the best tight end in the country when referencing him during the early signing day press conference a little bit ago. And he's got a chance to develop into something special in Tallahassee, someone who's a very versatile receiving threat already at the high school level and a high effort blocker, for someone who hasn't been in college and gotten to learn those techniques and nuances yet. But the effort is there with him. And I think he's going to be a special one for Florida State, getting a chance to be in Tallahassee and rolling early. And this is another position where the offense has had some departures at tight end, and to bring in a prospect like him and also to get him in early, I think there's going to be a chance that he plays an immediate role in this offense, and the future is bright for sure.
There's a chance he's tight end too, almost right away. You have Morlock coming back, but after that, Jaden Bell's moving on to the NFL, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then Biscuit, he committed to Arizona State, right?
Yep.
So, you're battling with Brian Courtney and Jarrell Powers.
And Jackson West, most improved offensive player.
I don't count Jackson West as a real player, I'm going to be honest. So Landon Thomas is going to have a chance to be tight end too next year. And, he's a very good player, and for good reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like him. Watching some of the film, and then also to some of these 7-on-7s we saw him doing, man, he just has that natural ability with the hands, man, and he's got that reach. And so, yeah, Mike Norvell, very excited to have him added into 2024.
I would say the offensive line class really impressive for Florida State. A lot of developmental guys who could develop into starters or some really quality players in the future. Obviously, you get ITT, the international prospect. He was in Tallahassee this last weekend for his official visit, and he's absolutely massive. A really big guy coming in with his frame. Also very athletic, so he's not going to get here till the summer, but still one that's going to be really exciting once Alex Atkins gets to work with him for a little bit. And then you've also got Jonathan Daniels coming in, Ty Hilton, and also Jaden Todd. And one thing about all these guys, you're talking about some really big offensive linemen. I think they're all 6'4" or bigger, and Florida State made a point to go after guys who are very athletic. So some really promising guys coming in up front who can develop over the years.
One that I like a lot is Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
One of the really talented wide receivers. I ended up picking Florida State, but just the physical attributes. And then you see that. And then also, too, you got to speak with him, Dustin, but looking at film as well, he's just kind of got that. I don't know what it like stands out. Like he just got that natural kind of feeling of a wide receiver that can make some plays not going to say he can be like a Keon, but he has a high ceiling just looking at some of his film. Yeah, 6'4.5", 200 already. I'm just like imagining what Coach Storms can do with him, man. I'm just imagining. And Ron Dugans does like that kind of size at wide receiver. We've seen that with a few of these guys. They like some tall and got some size with them as well. So there's Elijah Moore. There's Elijah Moore for you. You don't like Elijah Moore? I thought you liked Elijah Moore, Dustin.
My connection is messing up.
Oh, But yeah, I'm going to lead you into another one here in a second. But it's going to be someone from you're an alum from this school, so you should know who it is. Hopefully your connection's doing good. But also, Florida State landed a talented running back, really fast, shifty guy with Mekhi Danzy. Going to be a local guy as well, but 4-star ranked on 247 Sports, but 6'1", 175. Someone that is going to join Cam Davis in this running back room in the future. But I don't know if you missed it there, Dustin, but I was talking about Elijah Moore earlier.
Yeah, I heard you. Like you said, a guy with a lot of potential, almost 6'5", very long. And I was kind of saying it earlier, but he's going to be a heck of a red zone threat. Someone that can go up there and make those contested catches in traffic. Doesn't matter how many defenders are around him, just has that special knack to make plays that others can't. And I think Florida State really saw something in him, made this push. And you got to remember, this is one that the Seminoles won out for over Ohio State. And, we were just talking about Jeremiah Smith finalizing that pledge and what the Buckeyes have done with wide receivers. So for the Seminoles to get someone that Ohio State and Brian Hartline wanted, I think that says something about the caliber of prospect that Elijah Moore is. And, he's another one that I think has a very bright future as long as everything goes right as he continues to develop.
And then I was talking about Danzy too. You're an alum from there, so you got to show him some love as well.
Yeah, Danzy, I think the perfect kind of pairing mate for Davis in that backfield. You've got the traditional really running back and Cam Davis, and then kind of the tailback and Danzy, who can help there, not only as a running back, but also out of the backfield catching passes as well, can stretch the defense outside the tackle. Did deal with an injury during his senior season at Florida High, but his junior season where Florida High was able to make it to the state championship, he was one of the best, if not the very best in the entire state of Florida back there at that running back position, and averaged, I think it was 9 yards per carry, something ridiculous. Had a really good season. Someone that Florida State has fallen in love with over the past couple of years. And, he's going to be one of those guys to go from growing up in Tallahassee, having that dream to play in Garnet and Gold, and then actually get to do it now at Florida State, going to play football and also run track for the Seminoles. And, someone, Mike Norvell was talking about it, thinks that this could be the most dynamic class in the country as far as bringing in Cam Davis and Mekhi Danzy in that backfield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's some serious talent of just playmakers that have a lot of upside, and they can stay and be developed by their position coaches like Ron Dugans, and also to going over to Coach Yak and what we've known that he's been able to do with his resume and his tenure at Florida State. These guys get developed in that room, so you can just imagine what Davis and looking at Danzy, those two as a duo can do moving forward. And, one thing, I think just not going name by name, but just a discussion overall. What do you think is the biggest miss here in the position group? Because, one that stands out to me the most is probably bringing in some talent that can be a year 2 guy or maybe jump in year 1. But Florida State continues to lack in the defensive line unit and in the trenches as well. And, Florida State, yes, they're going to bring in a few guys. A lot of these guys, though, I think is developmental. Like, I don't think you see true playing time at the caliber of what you want it to be a difference maker for until 2026 with some of these guys. It's just going to take a little while. And what Florida State back in the day, man, they could bring in some dogs there that would be, like I said earlier, difference makers, playmakers there that can get to the backfield. And I think that's something Florida State continues to lack year by year, and they had to go in the transfer portal a few times with bringing in Daryl Jackson. Didn't get to see him play this last year, but Braden Fisk from Western Michigan, they have to rely on those transfers to come in, and you would like to have some guys come in and be developed. And yeah, you lost Ayobami Tafase. He's in the transfer portal. And then you've also got Daniel Lyons, you've seen some strides there. You lost Bishop Thomas as well, and he went on to Colorado. But still, of that magnitude, though, they're not bringing in the serious talent that you would expect a Florida State defensive line to have, kind of on a yearly level, and it's just definitely fallen off. And Coach Hagan's, there's got to be some, I don't know, accountability at some regard, and you just depend. And really interested in, to me, and we'll have a discussion, is what does Florida State do moving forward, and what does Mike Norvell do in some of these areas where defensive line and linebacker is thin going into next season.
You pretty much kind of said it all. At least for me, looking at this recruiting class, the only real point of criticism is right there up at that defensive front. You didn't bring in enough edge prospects. You've only got D.D. Holmes, and he's definitely someone that's going to have to develop before he can play a significant role in Tallahassee. We'll see about Marvin Jones Jr. We haven't got to talk about him yet, but we won't a little bit. And then on the interior, also bringing in 2 prospects, Jamori Flagg, and then you're able to close on Denaz White here late this Wednesday evening. But those are also guys that are going to need to take some time and develop. And right now, you look at the guys that are going out of this program, you don't have that time. At defensive end, you're losing Jared Verse, and you need someone to step up opposite of Patrick Payton as long as he doesn't enter the portal. And right now behind him, you've only got Gilbert Edmond and Byron Turner Jr. that have really any experience in that unit. And on the interior, I mean, it's just been absolutely decimated now, especially with Malcolm Ray officially in the portal. Right now, that means there's 4 eligible scholarship defensive tackles that come back next year. So you've got Daryl Jackson, Joshua Farmer, Daniel Lyons, and KJ Sampson. That's it. That's not enough. Even if you do bring in the 2, let's say all 4 of those guys stay, you bring in the 2 from the recruiting class, that's still not enough. Florida State's going to have to do some heavy portal hunting here on the interior and on the outside of that defensive front, because you need more talent and you need more bodies, plain and simple.
Linebacker definitely has to get better as well, but just to stick with defensive linemen, they've just lived in the portal so far between Verse, Gilbert Edmond, Kier Thomas, Jermaine Johnson, Braden Fisk, Fabian Lovett, Darrell Jackson, and I'm maybe even forgetting somebody, but that's just how they've lived these last couple of years. And is that sustainable? I certainly think it is to an extent, but you also have to have some guys you can develop, especially when you're consistently losing guys. So eventually that's going to have to get better. But linebacker, man, just you gotta find some quality there, because especially with DJ Lundy currently sitting in the portal, and you're looking at your projected starters as Blake Nicholson and Omar Graham as of right now, and I'm sure a few people just started sweating with that. You can't just be getting Tamir Hickman Collins this year. You took a bunch of developmental guys last year. The whole front 7 has to get better in general, but especially linebacker and defensive tackle, they've really got to shore that up.
No, that's another one where they've gotten thinned out without DJ Lundy. Like you said, Omar Graham, Blake Nicholson, then you've got Justin Pryor and DeMarco Ward, and that's it for returning scholarship linebackers. You're signing 2 guys who I do like a good bit. I think they're underrated, and Jaden Parrish and Tamir Hickman Collins, but they're not guys that you want to rely on in 2024 to play big roles. So
if Florida can get 2 blue chip linebacker prospects, there's no reason Florida State can't get 1.
Mm-hmm. And if you really think about it, they kind of relied too on these veterans to stay healthy this last year. I mean, if both, of course, yeah, Lundy's in the portal now, but just going to Bethune, and then also looking at Deloach, they relied a lot on those 2 guys to stay healthy throughout the season, and Lundy was able to come in and get playing time. But outside of that, you're working on Blake Nicholson. He arrived late as well too, but some of those guys, our majority, are project guys, and you got to develop them for a year. And yes, you would see Graham Jr. jump in there, but you could see at times, though, he was kind of all of sorts on the field at times, and we were expecting to see maybe a better jump out of him. But, yeah, Florida State's got to get better there in the linebacker room, and it's got to start on the recruiting trail in high school rather than having to rely on the transfer portal. And, yeah, Florida State can show on paper that they can bring in top-tier talent in the defensive end room, but at some point you want to bring in some talent that you can develop on your own, like a Pat Payton, that you've shown you've been able to do. It's just, we'll talk about the Joshua Farmer situation too, because this whole trenches talk, a lot of things changes because Lundy's in this situation, Farmer's in that situation as well. Two essential people that you need going into 2024. And you don't know if they're going to be sticking around. Shoot, you don't know if Pat Payne's going to be sticking around after this season. It's a really, really tough spot that Florida State needs to figure out and might need to make changes going into this next season. And I know there's a lot of loyalty between Mike Norvell and his staff members and yada, 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 but it's just becoming a reoccurring theme. And I understand Florida State does good in the transfer portal, but it just makes things so much easier if you're able to bring in these true freshmen with talent that can either make an impact early on, or you can develop and have going into 2025. It's just there's got to be some accountability held here soon, and Norvell's got to do that. And he can't be the main recruiter for every single one of these. He can't. He does not have the time to do this. He's doing enough throughout the game season, but these assistants, they've got to step it up. They got to step it up.
To some extent, I agree, and to some extent, I disagree. I said this to y'all the other day, but I think we're like 3 to 5 years away from high school recruiting being supremely undervalued as teams start to realize the transfer portal more and more. Obviously you like to have the high-end recruiting classes, but if you look at what Florida State's done the past couple years, in 2022, they signed 17 players, 7 of them already in the portal or have left. Same with the 21 class. I think 8 guys have already left from 17 enrollees. I wouldn't be surprised to see more of college football follow that same trend. And you're seeing them just emphasize the blue chip guys and then go after more transfers. They're taking, 13 to 18 high school guys and not the 25, 28 person high school classes like Florida State was going to sign this year. I think they ended up at 23. So to some extent, I do agree. You want to get the guys that you can develop, but at the same time, if 40% of the classes are going to transfer out in 2 years anyways, why waste the time? Why waste the assets? Go get guys that can play right away.
I understand the argument. That's kind of where we're at. You kind of have to pose the question, is it worth it to develop guys now with where college football is trending? I mean, you brought in Marquise Douglas, and now he's transferring out to go play somewhere else. You brought in Joshua Farmer, who hasn't officially entered the portal,
but he's played this game 3 times now.
Didn't even put out an announcement. Well, I'm just saying. But Florida State brought him in, a 3-star prospect, about 245 pounds at the time, and has developed him over the years into what he is. Same thing with DJ Lundy. Rodney Hill was on that developmental track to be a very good player at Florida State. Still could be. We'll see if he comes back. Malcolm Ray, a guy that's developed at Florida State. So, I mean, you build all these guys over the years and then lose them, frankly, over off-field circumstances and things like that. And it just sucks. The way that the game is changing, I mean, I think we could see it where you're looking at maybe 50% or more of your roster changing year over year. I think that's kind of where we're trending, unless there's some way to put guidelines or rules in place. And I don't really know how you do it. Until
the NCAA crumbles, I'll just go ahead and say, until the NCAA is no longer a thing, and then we can finally start getting collective bargainings and contracts and things like that, this is how it's going to be for a while. And I honestly think going forward, the most successful teams are going to be the ones that are getting the most impactful transfers. It's been the most impactful recruiting classes in the past couple of years just because Georgia and Alabama have been so dominant getting those guys in the high school ratings, and the transfers haven't caught up yet. I think as that starts to balance out, I think you're going to see teams that dominate the portal do really, really well. And, we see what Ole Miss has done so far this offseason. They've attacked the transfer portal like no other, and they've got a really talented team next year. So If they come out next year and go 11-1 in a really talented SEC, you're going to see some teams go, oh, why can't we do that?
Mm-hmm. One thing too, quarterbacks are being developed really quickly where they can go in and start right away and put on a good product. And we're seeing that now with Oregon and what they're going to do now with you're bringing in Dylan Gabriel, who Florida State faced last year in their bowl game down in Orlando. And now he's over there with Dan Lanning, going to play next year. And then right behind him is Dante Moore transferring from UCLA over there. And he's going to sit out a year and, watch what Gabriel does and get developed. And so, you can kind of stack a transfer on another transfer at this point. And Florida State, luckily, like I was saying earlier, they have a great resume and being able to get guys in. You could come in, play. We saw, Jared Verse is one of those players where he could have gone last year, obviously, but was a good idea for the comeback and put some good tape on and, have another stellar season for the Seminoles. And that has boosted him up into being one of the top defensive ends in this 2024 NFL draft once we get into April. But Florida State, still, there's an argument for everything, but, I agree. Yeah, it's going heavy into the transfer portal, and Florida State has been good to be able to do that. But, we'll get to the discussion here in a minute after we talk about Marvin Jones Jr., but there's some serious situations like in the comments now talking about why are we allowing for our primary guys, starting players from the defensive side of the ball get into the transfer portal and also offensively. You talk about Rodney Hill too. That's a potential starter going into next season just of the capability that he has and we've seen. I want to talk about Marvin Jones Jr. We talked about him visiting last week on Wednesday's show, but tonight we can officially say not everything's signed yet and sent in yet, but Marvin Jones Jr. has committed to the Florida State Seminoles, obviously. Legacy of Shade Tree, one of the best linebackers, not just best at Florida State, but one of the best linebackers ever to play the game. But his son is now at Florida State Seminole, previously with Georgia. But, now is coming into FSU, wanting to get a new change of scenery. And I think with how Marvin Jones Jr. played in high school, I think it's going to develop in what the kind of scheme that Adam Fuller will utilize him in.
This one was needed. We talked about the struggles along the defensive front, and now you get to bring in a guy, Marvin Jones Jr. Obviously, like you said, a legacy, former 5-star prospect, transferring from Georgia, has some SEC and championship experience. Now hasn't played a ton for the Bulldogs over his 2 years in Athens. Did deal with a shoulder injury, but started to finally show some of that promise this last year. Got into the rotation with Georgia. Made his first start in the SEC championship against Alabama, and has a lot of potential for Florida State to tap. Is going to come right into Tallahassee. Played an outside linebacker in a 3-4 scheme in Georgia. Going to come into Florida State and play that traditional defensive end role in a 4-3 system under defensive coordinator Adam Fuller. I think that could help him, getting back to that just traditional spot that he was able to play back during his prep career when he had a lot of success. And frankly, there's a lot of playing time to be had for Marvin Jones Jr. He's going to walk through that door and be one of the most talented players on that defensive front and be able to assume a big role out of the gate. Going to be able to go through the team for spring and get used to that defensive system. And it's going to be really exciting to see what he does with the Seminoles. They're going to need him to assume that 5-star role that he had coming out of high school, really start to blossom and stay healthy this offseason, play a big role in 2024.
Yeah, once again, those high school relationships win out a couple years later. Hopefully he ends up being everything we thought he could be coming out of high school, but it's good to see a Marvin Jones back in Tallahassee, that's for sure.
It certainly feels good. And that's another player, Dustin, that you'll be wanting to see whenever he gets out there on the field. He's just someone that if JP and what they can do in the end position, get him going and take it to a different level than maybe what Georgia, he just wasn't fitting that system well. And I think you can see him smoothly jump in and be a real big time competitor for a starting spot going into the 2024 season. And if he's got any kind of that natural genetics from his father, that's a steal right there from him. But nothing official yet, but he's put out his public commitment to the Seminoles.
And this is why you continue to recruit guys, even if you're going to lose out on that original recruitment. You think about Jeremiah Smith today, or even LJ McRae, sticking with that commitment to Florida over FSU and Auburn. That's why you continue to do this until the very end, because you don't know how things are going to play out. Marvin Jones Jr., Florida State recruited him down to the wire, lost out that decision. But, once he hops in the portal, you've already got a relationship with Mike Norvell and JP. Obviously, the ties to Florida State help here as well. And in this case, you also had his former high school coach. We mentioned on the last episode that Pat Surtain coached him at American Heritage High School, but him now in Tallahassee as well. Just kind of helps facilitate things and make it a lot easier whenever these talented guys hit the portal. So we'll see. Some of these guys today, LJ McRae, Florida's got a really tough schedule in 2024. There's no telling that Billy Napier is going to survive that slate. And if so, McRae might be in the portal a year from now. And guess what? Florida State built a very good relationship with him for not just a couple of days, but a couple of years. And that'll be something to think about if maybe one day he does get in the portal and is available for a second recruitment. But that's why Florida State does this. Even if it looks unlikely down the stretch, you continue to try. And even if it doesn't work out that day, who knows, a year, 2 years, 3 years. Keon Coleman was someone that they recruited in high school, ends up at Florida State now years later and leads the ACC in receiving touchdowns during the 2023 season, plays a really big role in Tallahassee. You just never know how it's going to turn out in the end, especially now.
Mm-hmm.
Florida's going to win 4 games next year. That schedule is so brutal. And a lot of people were complimenting DJ Lagway on staying firm on his commitment to Florida, but there was a lot of guys that were already jumping ship from Florida this year. I think there was one wide receiver that flipped to Texas A&M late. They lost a lot of people late, and if this goes how we all think it will in a year, there's gonna be a lot of talented players at Gainesville that are going to be going somewhere else.
There is going to be some talent that might be interested in coming back and giving Florida State a shot. And like we were just talking about, Marvin Jones Jr., one of those guys that was really close in the recruitment, and Florida State did a really nice, just genuine job and presenting what they wanted and getting Marvin Jones Jr. into that class, but still went with Kirby Smart and saw what it was like, and things just didn't get.
He won a ring.
He imagined. Yeah, he did get a national championship. But now I think you see him, which says something about him. He wants to get on the field more, and he wants to be used in what he thinks is best for him and his abilities. Let's talk about some transfer stuff, maybe some transfer drama. But these 2 guys are officially in the transfer portal, Rodney Hill and DJ Lundy. We talked about them last week, the intentions there, but they're officially in that portal. Don't need to go too further into this, gentlemen, because we've been kind of talking about these 2 since last week and on this show tonight. But there was also some kind of transfer drama within all over the place earlier in the week, and this was regarding Joshua Farmer, a player who has been a standout the last 2 seasons, who is expected to be a starter going into 2024. And, we saw 247 and one of their national writers, I'll bring his name up here in a minute, but put out, some scoop there that he was hearing that he was going to be entering the transfer portal. Saw Joshua Farmer shoot that down in the mentions below. We were told also the same, that wasn't correct and that he's still with the program, not planning on entering the transfer portal. But kind of just now everything's just been blown up, and now a lot of FSU fans wondering, yes, Joshua Farmer, another player, just kind of like DJ Lundy, like Rodney Hill here too as well, that you weren't expecting to have this happen. I was in a Spaces, I was listening to his older brother, and just talking about some certain things that maybe Lundy and the program weren't agreeing on. And I'm not going to talk specifics on what he was talking about, but there's just we've gotten to this day and age where NIL plays a vital factor for some of these players. And we saw a lot of players get retained last year. And now immediately once you lose your chance at college football playoff, you're looking ahead at next season. And I think the Joshua Farmer situation sucks because there's numbers that are reported and put out there from outlets. And I don't think that really necessarily helps anything whatsoever. It definitely doesn't help the program whatsoever, but it doesn't help both sides. And definitely if you're in support of a collective or, the battle's end here, I don't think those numbers should be shared. I don't think that's the right place to help anyone. And I think too, the organizations, the collectives, they've got to crack down on that kind of stuff becoming public because it allows us to see it, allows fans to see it, which you can tell right away immediately. There were some Rodney Hill numbers going out. Fans were just going right at Rodney Hill and just yelling at him. And it doesn't even give a chance for maybe the players to sit back, think about a few things. And before even meeting maybe their position coaches, it doesn't help anything whatsoever when numbers are shared out there. And I think that's something that, and we're in a new age of how this NIL stuff works and everything, but it's got to be changed and things got to be more private. And I think this is something that the battle's end is a learning lesson. These numbers do not need to be public. I have no idea why they're public. It just doesn't help anything whatsoever. And it's really unprofessional in my opinion.
I totally agree. Completely agree. I think there's some things that need to stay private and some things that can be public. Like you can say it's an NIL deal. Everyone's going to be fine with that. Saying the exact number to me is kind of tasteless. Let's say these guys end up wanting to come back to Florida State, but they've seen how the media and the fans have treated them. They're not going to come back to that. They're going to get out of Dodge as fast as they can. So not the biggest fan of it for sure. The sad thing with Farmer is because he's already played this game a couple of times, everybody believed it as soon as the report came out. And even if it ends up being true, it ends up being false, that narrative is already built. It's already there. And that's in the back of his mind for, maybe he has gone through the steps, but hasn't submitted the whatever it is, however you get into the portal application, I guess. I don't know. So yeah. Maybe he's done the steps, but just hasn't submitted it yet. Now he's saying, well, these guys clearly don't want me anyways. Why should I stick around? To me, it just continues to build on a bad narrative. And I don't see why we can't treat transfers like we do commitments, where we let the kids announce that they're entering the portal instead of saying, hey, so-and-so is intending to enter the portal but isn't in there yet. To me, it just doesn't look good to me.
Just a tough scenario on all sides. And at least for this one, you've got the report coming out that Farmer's going to enter the portal. Then he denies it publicly and obviously reached out to us as well as other outlets, I'm sure, to privately deny it as well. And then he deletes all of the stuff of him denied it on social media. Also now is still not officially in the transfer portal, and we're past that 48-hour mark where the player submitted their paperwork. It normally takes about 24 to 48 hours to appear in the portal. So he's not officially has his name in the database so far. So it's just a confusing scenario on all parts. And I think at this point, the only clarification we're going to get on is if he does actually appear in the portal or not. It'll be something to watch. But you think about like Malcolm Ray just got in the portal today, and he actually made his declaration back on December 11th. So 9 days between him announcing it on social media and also then appearing in the portal. And he was someone that was at Florida State's practice yesterday, fully dressed out and had some promising moments out there throughout the day. And then a day later, officially in the portal.
Which, that's nothing too crazy. We saw Amari Gaynor play in the game last year after he'd already committed to North Carolina. So these things can happen.
Yeah. And I think it's a mix of like we've been seeing, and then we've seen it with Farmer in the past too, where you're kind of testing the waters there and seeing what numbers you can rise from internally from the collective that you're at the program at, and then also hear some birds from other places across the country as well. Man, you definitely do. Not everything is clean in college football. Numbers are given to players, and that's how it goes from another program. And I just don't understand. The collective. I would cut off all everything. Cut it all off. Make it just a one-way road between me and the client that I'm working on. It doesn't make sense from a business side to air out numbers, or if you're not specifically trying to allowing others to air out numbers if you have a good relationship with them. It just doesn't make sense to me whatsoever on a business side. So that's something that's got to be fixed, and we kind of see a little of that lingering into what the Battles End had to deal with today. And there's some work to be done. A learning lesson, and a lot of fans wondering where money's going and such, but they also got to know too, there's a lot of other things and optics that just go outside of just high school recruiting. There's a lot of retention, but then when you go to retention, you wonder why Lundy, Hill, and Farmer are wanting to test the waters and see what else they can get from other places. So, this is where we're at. This is where we're at, though.
It's negotiation season for 30 days.
Hell yeah, bring it on. But I'm just glad I'm not in the world I couldn't imagine. There's a lot of stuff that has to go into it more than what we're probably speaking here on air.
I just can't imagine being a college coach this month. Having to travel around the country, doing these in-home visits. Back home, you've got the guys that you've got to talk to figure out, are they going to hit the portal, or are they going to come back or go to the NFL, or what have you. Then you got official visits on the weekend. You got the early signing period right now. If you're in a bowl game, I pray for you, because you're going through bowl practices as well with, however many players you got out there since the transfer portal is going on. It's a crazy time, for us covering the program, but I can't imagine being someone in it, dealing with that day to day. I mean, that schedule right now, rough.
Just more reason the early signing day and the transfer portal window needs to be pushed back a little bit, and all the bowl games maybe need to moved up a week, because it's kind of messy. It's been super messy for a lot of programs to have it smack in the middle of all these bowl practices. And I think I could be wrong next year, but I think the start of the 12-team playoff is the same day as the early signing day next year. You think this year's messy? That's going to be even messier.
I think they're going to have to figure something out, because it's just making a lot of the postseason, like the bowl games that normally people tuned in for in the past, you'd have these exciting matchups. Now you're losing all the players who you wanted to watch from both sides before the bowl game can even be played, because of either the transfer portal opening or NFL declarations. Like, there's got to be some way to either alter the schedule, have it played earlier, like you said, Austin, maybe push some of those periods back to still make these games worth playing in. Because right now you've got guys in the middle of the transfer portal. Some of them are obviously going to play for their current teams, but other guys have committed to other programs, or don't know if they're going to have a program to call home next year, and are looking for options out there right now and don't have time to commit to the program that they're currently at. It just all creates just so much chaos. I like chaos, but then I don't like chaos.
Yeah, there's good chaos and there's bad chaos. This is definitely more bad chaos the last couple of weeks. I think the 12-team playoff is going to help with the NFL opt-outs, because a lot of the players you want to see are playing for the best teams, and all the best teams are going to be in that 12-team playoff. Sure, you'll see like a Notre Dame go 9-3 and not play in the 12-team playoff. They may see some opt-outs, but for the most part, all the best teams and the best players are going to have those guys go through the playoffs, and I think that'll help on some fronts. You still have all the really exciting minor bowl games. I mean, we saw Old Dominion, whoever they were playing, have like a 28-point comeback. So you're still going to have some fun bowl games, and I think that 12-team playoff will help on the opt-out side, but there's got to be something done with the transfer portal window and early signing day for sure.
There's a comment here on YouTube, which is pretty funny, from Watson saying, listening to you guys is like listening to the NFL reporters, like who is going to what team and how much they will be getting paid. Never thought I would see this in college football. But yeah, we're in a hybrid now of college football and NFL, and it's only going to get more in the leaning side of the NFL at this state. And it shouldn't be a shocker anymore. This is where we're headed, but this is how the state of college football is at the very moment. There could be some big help, though, in how scheduling goes for definitely like the coaching staff, where Mike Norvell kind of threw some shade there at the NCAA. He said, I had to leave my team after Florida State found out that they were not going to be in the college football playoff. I had to leave right after that and get into recruiting right away and in-home visits. So a lot could help these coaching staffs and programs.
I think it might be easier to cover the NFL at this point because they're locked into contracts. Yep. But you get to this point in college football, and every time you have a transfer portal window, if it's in the spring, if it's in the winter or fall, however you want to call it right now, you've got guys that, I mean, frankly, have the leverage to negotiate. I mean, the guys that we've seen enter the portal so far, Rodney Hill was going to expect to play a big role for Florida State in 2024. Malcolm Ray was going to be a big asset along that interior defensive line. Marquise Douglas, I know he got phased out of the rotation some this year with Kyle Morlock and Jaheim Bell, but, with some of those losses, he was also going to be right there getting a lot of snaps once again. Patrick Payton, obviously not officially in the portal, and deleted his intention saying that he was going to enter. But when he did make that announcement on social media, he's going to be one of the best players, period, on Florida State's roster in 2024. These guys have that leverage to make these negotiations, and I think it just comes down to, are they going to get something acceptable behind the scenes, and we'll just see where it goes.
In college football and basketball, both are such big businesses, but especially football. The players were always going to get paid at some point, and they deserve to get paid. But the way the NCAA has just gone, hey, have fun with it, we're not going to do anything about it. That's where the issues have arisen. You've got to be able to find a way to regulate things. That's why I think we're going to get unions. We're going to get collective bargainings. We're going to get some of these things that the professional leagues have, because at this point, there's too much money in college football to not have those things. I mean, we saw the deal that ESPN and the SEC signed. I mean, that was worth billions of dollars, and the players technically aren't seeing any of that right now. It's still all through collectives. There's going to become a point where I think it's going to get toned down a little bit, but right now, it's the wild, wild west for sure.
Let's jump into some guys that have announced their intentions of entering the NFL draft, not the transfer portal, but heading to the NFL draft. And this is going to be really fun here to cover in a couple of months. It's actually going to be in Vegas, so it's going to be extra fun there. But let's start off with Jared Verse, Trey Benson, Jaheim Bell, and Fabo have announced their intentions to enter the NFL draft. Jarian Jones has but is actually going to be playing in the Orange Bowl. Those first four that I mentioned won't be down there in Miami on the field playing for the Seminoles. But what a career for a lot of these guys, but more specifically Jared Verse and Trey Benson, and also Fabo in there, and Jarian. Those guys, man, what a stellar type of mentality that they brought coming into this next year and wanting to fight. Definitely Jared Verse specifically. Trey Benson kind of could have tested the waters as well, but these guys were such intricate players and bringing this team into what we saw it become, into a 13-0 ACC championship team for Mike Norvell.
I don't think any of these are surprises, especially once Florida State was snubbed from the college football playoff. It made the most sense for guys like Trey Benson and Jared Verse to move on, protect their draft stock, especially since, they're expected to be drafted. And then you think about a guy like Fabian Lovett, someone who's dealt with injuries throughout his career. I just don't think, not worth it in his mind to go out there and risk something else before he finally gets his shot to prepare for the professional level. And then, Jaheim Bell as well. But all these guys, very good players at Florida State. Jared Verse and Trey Benson in particular, are going to be remembered for a long time for what they did in Garnet and Gold. Fabian Lovett, especially for being here since the beginning, transferring in, being here since 2020, going through the entire process in Tallahassee with Mike Norvell, but then the star power that Trey Benson and Jared Verse have brought to this team the last 2 years. I mean, Verse is going to be someone drafted in the first round in April. Teams made it their point to try and stop him this year, and he was still able to put up some very good numbers, especially late in the season when Florida State needed him. He was at his very best. Trey Benson didn't get his 1,000 yards, but had 14 rushing touchdowns this year, and is going to be remembered as a guy who, whenever Florida State faced their rivals, whenever Miami came to town or they went to Gainesville and had to take on the Gators, Trey Benson at his very best. I mean, I think it was 10 total touchdowns against Miami and Florida during his career. Just an incredible number when he's only played them in 4 total games. But some really good Seminoles moving on, and I think you kind of said it earlier, Logan. It's going to be exciting to cover these guys at the professional level.
I think I was only slightly surprised to see Fabian Lovett not play in the Orange Bowl, just because, like you said, he's dealt with injuries, especially these last couple of years. I thought he'd maybe want one more game on tape at full health against, even if Georgia ends up having opt-outs, it's still a very talented Georgia offensive line.
Yeah.
Maybe would have liked to have that tape, but it's a two-way street. He's had injuries. He doesn't want to risk that injury again. I totally understand it, but like you said, just so much star power. I'm really excited to see where Verse goes in the NFL draft in May. And, there's a lot of talk that Trey Benson could be one of the first 2 or 3 running backs off the board when we get to that NFL draft. And he's going to go to a team that's going to fit him best.
Is it in May?
Should be.
I said April, so I don't know.
Should be April. NFL draft is always
this week. It's
April.
not always. The last few years it's been in May, but this year it's last weekend of April. My bad.
Hell no. Let's go and check this real quick. 2022 or 2022 NFL draft date. It's always been in April. It's always late April though. Yeah, April 28th to the 30th. There you go. Got close to May, not to Cinco de Mayo though, Bob.
2021 got into May.
Let's see here.
I'm going back.
NFL
yeah,
draft.
Like the last day of the draft, or
for the most part,
last day.
For the most part, it's the end of April. I thought there was some Mays back then. Whatever.
23rd to the 25th. April.
2015 was May.
Let's see, 1986 NFL draft.
2014 was like the 3rd week of May. So it bounces around.
1967 NFL draft, April 26th.
He's doing research, but there have been some other guys on Florida State's roster who haven't.
I wasn't searching.
There have been plenty of guys on Florida State's roster who haven't made NFL declarations at this point, namely Keon Coleman, Braden Fisk, Kalen DeLoach, Hayden Bethune. You've still got a guy like Renardo Green, Keem Dent. Still some really talented players on Florida State's roster who haven't publicly said if they're planning to play in the game or if they're not just yet.
Yeah, so just got to fix the wording there. A lot of those guys are going to the NFL. We already know that, especially because a lot of them are out of eligibility. We just don't know if they're playing yet.
Well, that's what I meant. Like if they're going to opt out of their final game or just play their final game. It's really the 2 choices.
December has been a lot, and Dustin, you've been up early, so we'll allow you to have a little bit of a slower brain. But luckily, we're almost done with this show. Been going a long time, and also too, shout out to our Instagram viewers in here. There's a lot of y'all in here, so appreciate y'all now getting the stream over there to you guys. So shout out to our Instagram squad, a big follower base over there. But let's finish off the show, gentlemen. Unless y'all have anything else football related, we'll talk more practice observations and Georgia next week as we officially prepare that. We'll be down there in Miami for that show, so we'll have a few little warm-up stretches of practice, and then we'll also have a few interviews here and there too that we'll be able to discuss into next week's show. So, and we'll also probably get a better feeling of who's playing and who's not. Right now, it's just up in the air with a handful, maybe 2 or 3 handfuls of guys. So don't really want to do any kind of hard-hitting analysis that we really do a great job here in it anyways. But God, we need as much help as we can get to figure out who's actually playing next week.
It was funny. Someone asked Mike Norvell yesterday, do you have an idea of who's going to be playing in the game? Like kind of hoping to get some answers, a little bit of clarity. And Mark Norvell's like, I have an idea.
It's hard to believe that game's next Saturday. It does not feel like it whatsoever.
Yeah, man. Like, it just feels after you got hit hard with the college football playoff situation, that Sunday was brutal, but that whole week stretch just full of distractions, man. From you went way into on-field stuff to right outside of it, and which sucks the most, having to listen to analysts. But shout out to Charles Barkley, though. I love Charles Barkley, but a real one, saying Florida State should have been in the college football playoff, and brought up the discussion and argument that Florida State won 3 games with 2 backup quarterbacks, one of them being a true freshman in an ACC championship. So shout out to Charles Barkley. I like that guy. I've always liked him. They have a great show on TNT. If Charles Barkley ever wants to hop on here, I know he's an Auburn alum, but if everyone wants to hop on here, feel free during this offseason. But let's talk about FSU basketball real quick to end off the show. Yeah, I mean, everybody now, before you leave, hit the like button if you're excited for Luke Kromenhoek and the Cam Davis show and 2025, really going in 2 years once those guys get going. But make sure you hit the like button if you're excited for Charles Lester, if you're excited for Landon Thomas and Marvin Jones Jr. And for some of y'all in the comments that still have hope that Jeremiah Smith, he still hasn't sent in his LOI to Ohio State yet. There could be a last flip there to Florida State. If you think there's some kind of hope there, hit the like button. But it's time to talk about Leonard Hamilton.
If you're here for basketball.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. Jeez, don't hurt us, Dustin, and drag us down there. But
hurt us.
Yeah, hit that like button. We definitely appreciate it. But yeah, BZ, lead us into some basketball. I saw getting the win there against North Florida, back in the win column. We love to see it, but man, oh man, Florida State basketball is worse than we thought.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it. It's been funny seeing some of the people that I've had reach out to me the last week, really, just talking about the team and the state of the program. The SMU game Saturday was brutal. Just some of the worst offense I've seen from a Florida State team since they got out of that twin post systems in 2013. I want to say was the last year of the twin posts. It was rough, and if you look at that 4-game stretch of Georgia, UNC, SMU, and USF, they shot 36% from the floor, and that's not going to get it done against anybody. Luckily, we're able to bounce back a little bit against UNF last night, but that's a game you're supposed to win. I'm not exactly taking too much stock in it. You've got a couple more games against Winthrop and Lipscomb to finish out your non-conference before you get into the conference play, but we're probably not going to know anything else about where this men's team stands until early January when they start playing some of those ACC teams. I'm not really taking much stock in a win against UNF, who shot 46 3-pointers last night. It was insane to watch in real time. And then Lipscomb and Winthrop or whatever. Just hopefully you could start off conference play on a right note when you're playing some really bad ACC teams at home to start January, and Wake Forest, Notre Dame, and Georgia Tech. No reason you shouldn't win all three of those.
I guess the only positive things that I can say is Darren Green Jr. able to get that 1,500 career points in the win against UNF. And then also Taylor Bowen continues to show some of that potential, had a career game. And, you got to hope for Florida State that carries over and he continues to make these strides into the conference slate. Because if so, I mean, that, we know Florida State's not going to contend necessarily for an ACC championship. But if a guy like Bowen, who's a young prospect and you expect him to be around this program for more than 1 year, if he can blossom into something and then, show you as you get into a really tough slate of conference games, be big for Florida State.
He was really good last night. He made a couple really impressive plays. He had one where it should have been a chase down block, but they called it a foul, and I was kind of mad at it because it was a really impressive play. He showed his range from three. He had a couple nice finishes at the basket. He was impressive last night, and they're going to have to play him more, especially with the injury to Cameron Fletcher. Bowen can eat up some of those minutes at the 4 position that Fletcher would play sporadically, but it was definitely good to see him. It's been good to see Primo Spears on the floor finally, even if he's not shooting the ball great as of right now. He was 2 of 14 Saturday night and 2 of 7 last night, maybe 3 of 7. He's still getting some things worked out, but at the same time, he's getting to the basket. He's making plays. We haven't seen a point guard do that in a little while. He kind of reminds me of a more athletic David Nichols, who some fans might remember from that 2018-19 team. But good to see him out there. Just needs to get a little bit more settled in.
Are you excited for more FSU basketball games?
Sure.
I didn't like that. I didn't like that.
They got Winthrop next. They beat Winthrop last year.
Yeah, Winthrop Friday night. Did they actually play last year?
Thought they did. Maybe it was the year before.
I don't think so. I really don't think they played Winthrop in 3 years. I could be wrong.
Yep, you've got a stretch of Winthrop, Lipscomb, and Georgia Tech the next 3 games. Can you win 2 or 3?
You should win 3 or 3. Should. Georgia Tech, or sorry, yeah, you said Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's not very good. They did get a good win against Mississippi State in the ACC SEC Challenge, but otherwise it's not a very good team. Then you have Notre Dame very shortly after that, and Notre Dame is horrible. They lost at home to the Citadel by 20 last night. So should be able to win a few games in a row here heading in before you get the tougher ACC schedule.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. Appreciate everyone here. Terrell is asking, where do you get the fit, VZ? On. You do have the wrong racer on.
Looking lit today.
This is the only NASCAR driver, Logan. Don't get it twisted.
Not at all.
The hat is from, yeah, it's the only good driver. The hat is from Old News Vintage, a store here in Charlotte. I don't know where I got this shirt from. Probably Old News as well. But I've got like 10 or 12 vintage Jeff Gordon shirts that I've gotten from all over the place. So I really don't remember where I got them all from.
I've got like 10 or 12 shirts total.
We know, because you only wear gray and black.
It's an easy color. It's easy on the eyes.
Everything.
No, I've got a bunch of vintage Jeff Gordon stuff because I was always my driver growing up.
Was it now? Dale, yeah, baby. I love Dale. Dale Earnhardt's better.
Nope. Even if I live in the town, like 2 minutes from where Dale's from, but
you're messed up. Don't know what you're doing. Mental's wrong. Brain cells are shot.
A Kenny Chesney concert or something.
I will be in April.
There you go. For probably the NFL draft time.
The tour's coming up.
Like the weekend before, I think.
The 11-day tour.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. Before you leave, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. As always, you can listen to the show on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. If you're new here, we go live every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. So next week, we will be previewing Florida State versus Georgia, which is just crazy to think of that I'm saying this, but it's not going to be in the college football playoff. Oh, my goodness. It's weird to say, but here we are. Florida State's going to be playing in the Orange Bowl, so we'll have some better practice observations for you guys as well, and we'll get a good feel for who's going to be out there available for the Seminoles going into facing the Bulldogs. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of y'all's weekend, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Peace.